Northbeam has very recently launched the news that they're being given impression user logs for the last 30 days. So in that example, if I watched a brand ad on Meta 29 days ago, I then watch a product video 15 days ago, and then I go on to click a DPA and buy, there's only currently one solution which can tie that together, which I think is quite interesting.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-commerce strategy, technology and CX-focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-commerce strategy, leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This episode is sponsored by Shopify. We are doing a kind of like roundup around like paid media performance marketing, trends, measurement, an update with Josh from Vervaunt, who joined us earlier in the year to talk about general trends in the market. I think it was quite a few months ago. But Josh, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, thank you very much for having me, as always.
And last night was Vervaunt's Christmas party. So there's a degree of mental slowness from both of us today, although I finished earlier, so I'm obviously feeling a little bit more sprightly. But for people who've not met you before, listeners who don't know what your role is at Vervaunt, do you want to give people a bit of a flavour for who you are and what you do?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. So I'm Josh, one of the co-founders of Vervaunt. So I've been in performance marketing for probably 14 years or so. But Vervaunt was formed about 8 years ago. We work with some amazing brands. So quite often it's kind of like in the retail premium fashion space. Yeah, I work with Doc Martens, Champion, Mulberry, Paul Smith, Osprey. Quite a broad range, but some amazing like globally recognized brands. And in terms of my role, so I'd say I'm about 70% of my time is spent working with clients. So I'll be very focused on specific challenges. So measurement and attribution would be a pretty key area where I'd normally come in and give recommendations around third-party solutions or, how to loop in finance and manage those discussions, create strategy, international planning, any board level conversations or, kind of like PE conversations, I'd normally come in. So yeah, always been focused on paid, still a massive passion. And if you have a 30%, it's obviously just the admin of being a co-founder of business.
Yeah, the non-glamorous but rather important stuff to keep a business.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend follow Josh on LinkedIn. Always posts useful, interesting updates and like industry trend data. So well worth listening to what he's saying. Let's get into it. So before we start talking specifically about the like measurement and where measurement's gone and how some of the modern platforms are enabling far smarter like attribution targeting and improvements. Let's just do a quick. Obviously, the big trading weekend of Black Friday's just happened. Retailers have gone into bunkers and are emerging the other side. Do you want to give us a bit of a flavour of what you've seen and what trends? I guess I don't work with people on the performance marketing like you do, but the clients I work with and who I've been speaking to generally have found a decent Black Friday, not stellar, but decent. A few of them have had double-digit year-on-year growth. People are up on budget, up on last year. I saw some data released by some of the banks, like Nationwide, for example, was saying that Black Friday, the transactions going through their networks, they saw an 8.7% jump in transactions versus the same period last year. So it feels like it's positive in terms of total numbers, but I've also seen enough evidence from retailers, right, to suggest that actually the margins are a little bit stronger this year. That some of I think the average discounts for some retailers is lower. I don't know whether that holds true to what you're seeing with your client base.
No, certainly. So I think there's probably quite a lot to digest over the Black Friday weekend. So I think the first thing I'd probably call out, so over Fake Friday, I'd say the narrative of the longer shopping period has probably existed for, 2 to 3 periods now. Black Friday is not just a weekend. It's an extended period over November. So a lot of our clients were launching around the Fake Friday period. And we came into the office Monday. Obviously, we've been tracking and kind of optimizing over the weekend. But on the Monday morning, I think for the first time in Vervaunt's history, we had more clients down than up year on year. So we were just looking at the Friday to Monday or Friday to Sunday period. And we've got a kind of like a good hypothesis around essentially kind of like what we think could have driven that and could have drove that. But so kind of began doing these daily trend updates to all of our clients. So we've got about 60 clients across the agency, all very similar in terms of vertical and size. We were basically giving kind of like a snapshot around how's CAC performing in different markets, what's the year-on-year trend and nuance, where are we seeing growth, where are we seeing challenges. And I think that gave a lot of kind of like, a lot of support for kind of like people who were, slightly behind target, what they didn't expect. But what we've seen since then is just a complete shift in the kind of like spending pattern. So Black Friday weekend itself was huge, absolutely massive. So we kind of like recovered all of the amount where we were down the week prior. Vast majority, I think probably 80% of our clients were up for Black Friday. We normally look at an average change of year-on-year growth for each client. So we normally look at like the average change. But if we just looked at combined revenue, which Vervaunt drew for all of our clients, it was up about 10% for November. So the whole period for us was really strong, predominantly driven by the Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend. And then I had kind of like some good updates from Google as well. So from their side, they're reporting, I think about 2.3% year-on-year growth in purchases from their end. So essentially kind of like from all of the data they've got. And there was an interesting graph Google shared a couple of years ago, actually, where actually I think it might have been last year. So about 3 years ago, Black Friday's growth was up about 15% year-on-year. The year after, it was about 10%. The year after, last year, was up about 7 or 6. So you've got the rate of growth has just been coming down and down, and now it's at 3%. So I think next year will be the interesting one. But yeah, we had some clients where I think what was quite nice is we had so many clients where we just really proved the value of performance marketing. So we had hourly trackers set up for all of our clients. So on a Saturday morning, we give an update. Saturday afternoon, we give an update, and we've got a clear view of hour by hour how we're trading on the year and against a prior day. And there were so many examples of clients like, okay, we think we're doing quite well. We're going to throw in an extra, 20K of budget for the day. And then we see it within the hours. So, if I looked at, not to call out, but Paul Smith and Strathbury, I know specifically kind of like we were very focused on the like hour to hour numbers. And as soon as we made a change, it was kind of like seen site wide, and it was kind of just huge all around. So yeah, really positive. As I said, I think the broader concern would be that global rate of growth has just come down, and the point of where it was 15% 3 years ago and about 2.5% now. So it'll be interesting to see what retailers can do next year. But to your final point is, I'd say across the board, a lot of our clients were, I guess, less generous with discounting. So might not necessarily have been site-wide, might have been slower to add kind of like core lines to promotion. Top line figure might have been a bit lower in terms of the percentage off. And I'd say profitability, I guess, has probably been the bigger focus. We'd have a lot of clients where gross is up 10% and net is up 30%. Just where they're like really trading the site hard. There's been a massive shift towards advertisers prioritizing full price as well. So for Doc Martens, we will basically have like a very clear, again, hour by hour view of full price versus sale price. So we've just, we're making sure we prioritize full price as well. Quite a lot change, but overall it's been really positive, which it's quite nice.
What do Mattel, Victoria Beckham, Sennheiser, and Glossier all have in common? They power their businesses with Shopify. Shopify is the most innovative and scaled commerce platform on the planet. It also happens to have the best converting checkout on the planet. Shopify, powering the future of enterprise commerce. Find out more at shopify.com/enterprise.
Yeah, it's a good call out on the overall rate of growth, and it's inevitable. If you look at the economic situation that persists and the impact of budget, so many people have been squeezed. Like in the UK, tax thresholds held again, which means people are paying relatively more tax, and therefore disposable incomes are under pressure, and that definitely impacts. I mean, premium brands and some of the real premium ones you're working with are insulated partly from it, but the aspirational market is the one where you see that dropping out a little bit because people defer that aspirational purchase.
Yeah, certainly.
But that was really interesting. I love hearing, this is the great thing about working with people where they've got access to all of the data across a wide range of client bases.
Yeah, we had one of our hypotheses was basically that because every year the window has been extending, and so many advertisers will have, like a 3-day email CRM strategy where they need to change the promo, or they need to do something to keep, a 3-week sale period interesting. And then normally it ends on Black Friday with the biggest sale moment, with the most lines, the highest discount. The prime example would be Extra 10. Like, so many clients and advertisers will be doing Extra 10 on the Sunday, Monday. And I think the consumer's just savvy enough to learn Fake Friday isn't the heart of the discount. The heart of the discount is at the end on Black Friday weekend. And I think that was kind of like a loose hypothesis we've been building just with clients where the trading numbers just completely don't fulfill what it was last year, but overall it's up. So I'm sure there's loads of other reasons, but I certainly think we've got so many clients where Extra 10's Sunday, Monday. They did it last year. So naturally the consumer's not going to be, hammering sale on the Fake Friday. Or just wait.
No, if you build an expectation and a behaviour, it's hard to break people out of the pattern. So, but that data piece leads us nicely into the measurement thing. Is obviously you cannot understand the data without really good granular measurement. So one of the key focuses for this episode is about your view on measurement tools, because we've had the inevitable acceleration of AI tooling into data sets. Love to know how you've seen this evolve, how you are seeing more modern tools being used. Like what is the difference it means to merchants in terms of what they can now analyze and do?
Yeah, 100%. So I think the first thing is, it'd be interesting to see a graph of the number of measurement tools which have kind of like been introduced over the last 5 years. And, it definitely would be a bit hockey stick towards kind of like the last 2-3 years or so. And I think what's happening is retailers and advertisers now have just got so many options in terms of what technologies to look at. So I guess in terms of the most common tools our clients would use, so Triple Whale, Phosphor, Northbeam, and Endema have got a really interesting proposition, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But I guess one of the challenges with measurement today is, say, for instance, you had 2 platforms running against each other and they just give you a completely different ROAS. And then you're taking that then to your CFO or finance team, and you're basically just relying on the kind of like, the black box infrastructure and modeling or regression modeling or MMM or however they do it. You're basically just like relying on that as your complete forum to make decisions. And I think what's quite interesting is I just think there's so much more advertisers can do before they really start to understand if a meta ROAS is 3-1 or 4-1. There's a lot of work which I think is being missed before that. So I certainly, in my final recommendation, I'll touch around why it's worthwhile having a third-party tool, and I think you certainly want to have them at a decent level. But my problem is if you just suddenly take that as gospel and then you report it internally, it never really gets, a CFO's back, really never gets their back in. They want much more tangible, proven examples of, whether it's Geo-Based testing or incrementality testing, whatever else it is. It's quite difficult to just go, so Triple Whale, for instance, has 7 attribution models. So if you chose Triple Whale as your kind of like source of truth, and then you're talking to finance and they go, oh, what model are you using? And then you say, we're using this one. You then have to justify that to the CEO. So you've already got yourself in a discussion where it's like, what model are you choosing as opposed to, what platform you've chosen. So I was going to spend a bit of time just going through what I think brands can do already, where there's just so much data available and so much potential for you to kind of like really build interesting conversations, drive more profitability is kind of like the bigger theme of what I talk around. And then you would start to enhance all of that with a third party tool. Yeah, I can just go through some ideas. That works.
Yeah, let's go for it. Let's
Okay, lovely.
Free format.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, so our Christmas party last night. So I was speaking to a few clients about this, but so Meta ad spend on Meta in Q3 this year grew 25% year on year. And again, if you look at kind of like Meta's ad revenues, again, it's just a consistent growth, and there's no way that next year ad spend on Meta is not going to be increasing, and CPMs are going to increase alongside that. So for all of our clients, realistically, the truth will be you need to spend at least 10% more just to maintain the current coverage that you've achieved this year. So you're kind of going in a challenge day one. So what our focus is going to be is really orientated around driving much more value from every pound that we do spend. So I'll talk through a couple of examples, but we've been doing a bit of work recently, which I think is quite nice in terms of understanding how LTV is impacted by the first item ordered. So, and then it kind of like, this will talk us through to the premise of having like an allowable CAC. So essentially, rather than having a business-wide CAC, the amount we're happy to spend on acquiring customer, we build specific CACs based on much more business-orientated data. So it might be LTV, it might be whether the product's returned, it might be the margin, and everything else I'll talk through in a moment. But in terms of the LTV piece, a lot of the work we've been doing is, understanding if the first item ordered impacts purchasing behavior within 12 months. And we've got an amazing example for one client. So they're a jewelry brand and their AOV is about £100. And we did a bit of work and we looked at the LTV based on the first item ordered. And when we put it in a graph, you could see that the AOV really contributed to LTV. So the first, and this is LTV after the first purchase. So the AOV isn't influencing LTV because it's the day after. And then what we found was the customers who spent over £200 on their first order, so double the AOV, they spent 7 times more in the first year than every other customer who spent under £200. And as I said, this is the day after purchase, so it's the 364 days following date of purchase. And then for us, that's just such a argument where if we're going into next year where ad spend is increasing, we can justify spending 30% more on these customers because we know they drive 7 times more back in a 12-month window. And I think this is kind of like the data which I would be really encouraging brands to look at next year. So as opposed to talking through whether, Northbeam give us this ROAS, Meta give us this ROAS, and it's a difference of 5 to 3 or whatever it might be, I think the true value is like really driving tangible profitability for clients and you kind of like your retailer. And a couple more examples around that. So if you were to build like an allowable CAC model, I think that LTV one is quite nice. So there'll be certain products where you can justify spending more if you know that they drive more repeat or higher LTV. But then there's so many other factors you might want to bake in. So like returns would be quite a big one. So we work with a number of multi-brand retailers, or we work with a lot of retailers where they have quite a broad category of products. So Paul Smith literally sell, furniture to bikes, to underwear, to candles, to everything. And their return rate varies quite heavily by area, as you would imagine. So there's going to be a lot of value in us spending more on products with a lower return rate and reducing our spend on products which return quite a lot. We've got some clients where return rates are up to 35% across the board. So if we begin, lowering that down to 25%, even if the CAC is higher, because we're paying more to match the ad costs, we know the profitability of the business is better. So essentially just shifting like all metrics down to net. So we've got like a full view of what is the net impact to the business. And then other ideas would be, like margin would be a pretty big one. Most of our clients are brands themselves and they've got a pretty consistent margin across the board, but it's always something we would, dissect and look at. And then another one might be stock. So essentially this would be more of a scoring mechanism that you apply. But if you've got like stagnant stock, which is, costing a lot to maintain the warehouse, it's not moving, that's probably where you could justify spending a bit more on getting rid of it, because that it just kind of like helps the business business long term. So yes, one of our goals will be to move to like an allowable CAC system. So we're paying a certain amount of money per customer based on how valuable they'll be from a profitability perspective. So yeah, I think that's a really, really decent one. There's a lot you can do there. And then I think there's a lot you can do around your own testing as well. So for most of our clients, we'll probably be using CAC or cost of sale or MER. So it will be the relationship between ad spend and site-wide numbers. So we're not yet answering the ridiculously impossible challenge of attribution in terms of like really giving a contribution to channel X, channel Y. What we're doing is we're focusing on the overall impact for business and then starting to understand how that evolves with kind of like different levels of investment. So the first metric I would want to understand if I was in a brand would be our incremental CAC. So essentially that would be the cost of every new customer. And then so say your CAC's £50 and we drive 100 customers a week. If we want to go and acquire 120 customers next week and CAC goes to £60, we know that kind of like the extra amount we might have had to pay for those customers could be £100, say. But as soon as you understand that kind of removes any problem and challenge of incrementality or attribution, because you just know that when we spend more, every new customer costs us £100. And then that again is just kind of like purely net new to the business, purely driven by paid. And then basically what we're finding, we just see these as conversations which get more buy-in and more trust from finance. And if you're able to truly show a profit number or an overall number for the business, it just seems to have a lot more merit. And then we would kind of like support that with third-party solutions. So I'm sure we'll talk through what third-party solutions can do in a moment. But yeah, just to final one on the brand side itself or advertiser side, I guess the whole geo-testing piece as well. So I think this is probably going to get quite a lot of growth over the next couple of years. So Google are currently introducing geo-based testing. So essentially the goal would be that you identify 20 cities, and when they're grouped into 10 cities in each, the performance is just consistent and very similar over time. And then what the goal would be is you've got your kind of like line graph of revenue of both city group A, city group B. And then when you increase investment in only city group A, the additional revenue drive divided by the additional spend is that kind of like incremental ROI. And then you've got a proven, or the best time to do this would be with like brand awareness. So if you start running, above the line media brand awareness, it's got a slightly longer lag between interaction, engagement, and purchase. One of the cleanest ways to test that would be geo-based. And Google are currently investing in it. Meta launched something a couple of years ago. A lot of the third-party tools are looking to enable this through their platform. And yeah, it's just something I think advertisers should be starting to look at today. And again, it's just one of those things where you can take it through to your finance team. We've got a 0.95 correlation between these two city groups. As soon as we turned on brand spend, correlation lowers and uplift is here. Uplift minus additional spend equals incremental ROI.
Yeah. I mean, the great thing is it's very easy to validate that through the sales data in an e-com platform based on the customer ordering.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, exactly.
You could ship anywhere. It could be a gift, but you can do it on the billing to know where the person who's bought has come from. So yeah, it's really, I like that. Do you know what it reminds me of? The funnel days I used to have in direct mail, and you used to do like geographical testing. So you would test some direct mailers in a very specific geographic on your audience cohort targeting, and you would measure incrementality on web based on the order base.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so that's really good that they're baking that in. And let's get into the third-party systems, because I know that you've worked with a lot of different tech. I know that that Vervaunt has worked quite closely this year with Dima, and they're making a lot of waves in terms of providing a kind of deeper business intelligence set. Yeah. So do you want to talk about what is good in third-party tools and what can people get that's added value?
Amazing. Yeah, certainly. So in terms of the added value, I think the first, and I think Redeemer's almost got a separate proposition, so I might just come on to those at the end. But in terms of a day one MTA/MMM kind of like based solution, I think the first benefit I would find is the level of detail that you can get from fingerprinting. So essentially someone like Triple Whale or Northbeam especially are really strong at this, where Triple Whale, you can go in, you can look at your, over the last 2 months, take all new customers, and you can download, similar kind of like GA, UA back in the day. And you can download a user report of the last 6 months and look at every interaction that that user has had before coming to the site. So for Triple Whale, as I mentioned, I still think it's difficult if we're in a financial discussion and we say, we're using the total impact ROAS of Triple Whale, and we believe ROAS is 3-to-1 on Meta. It's still quite difficult to get buy-in for that. Whereas I think if we take to them, actually, out of all of your new customers we've driven in the last 4 months, 40% of them have landed on the site at least once from a meta ad. And I think that's just like a really, really like strong evidence. It's just like a objective number. Whereas I think sometimes when you're truly getting a number, like an ROI to something, it's a bit more subjective and it's a bit more reliant on behind the scenes logic, which, I've spoken to most tools, and it's quite difficult to truly explain how those systems work, or it's quite difficult for them to kind of like show evidence-backed reasoning behind it. So especially with MMM, I would love the capability where it shows you our regression modeling, our MMM. It's assigning 30% of overall contribution back to Meta. And here is the time-stamped periods as to why. So, on this period, you spent more on Meta, here was the uplift. And this period where the Google and Meta spend had this relationship, this was the revenue. So we've assigned it here. So I think that piece is missing from media mix modeling currently, where it's like the explanation around how it's got to where it's got to. Whereas what a lot of the MTA based solutions, and obviously a lot of the tools do both, but I think what the MTA data allows is that kind of just really true core objective data you can take into a boardroom. And I think another example for Triple Whale would be, so the prime example for Meta would be Meta still attributes all of its sales back to the last click. So if we run 5 brand films and a user is kind of like constantly, watching those films, and then they go on and click a DPA ad, and then go on to buy, and the DPA ad, is just the final piece of the pie. Meta assigns that conversion to the DPA ad. So why you would need, and you'd want an MTA tool, is if someone clicks on the site from the brand ad, you've got that piece of journey, which is fundamental. So I'm certainly not here to say third-party tools aren't necessary or needed. I think there's just so much work you can be doing day one around that profitability CAC piece. And then when you are using a third-party tool, I wouldn't just take the given ROAS as gospel. I'd really go in and kind of like look at your data yourself. For instance, if you took every customer journey over the last 12 months from Triple Whale and you put it in a pivot table and you essentially just built all of the journeys out, you could see what are the most common journeys. You could see how often is Meta a touch point in a journey. You could almost start to understand your own DDA model. So you could almost start to understand how this conversion rate can change if they are exposed to a brand ad on Meta versus they only come through Google Shopping. So you can almost like build what in essence DDA modeling is. So I think that's always really interesting. I think just back on the actual measurement tools. So one of the bigger changes to the landscape has actually been Northbeam. They've just come out with a pretty big update. So not sure how they're the only one, but basically they're the only provider now where Meta are sharing impression user logs back to Northbeam. So in that scenario I just mentioned, so say I watch a brand film on Meta for 30 seconds and I love the brand film, really, really engaged. 25 hours later, I click on an image ad and then go on to buy, not one measurement tool currently sees that, because Meta's attribution window only covers a 24-hour period of a view-based interaction. So it's very, very difficult today to manage brand spend properly, or to like fully understand brand spend without doing a geo test, without doing a control exposed. But Northbeam instead have very, very recently launched the news that essentially they're being given impression user logs for the last 30 days. So in that example, if I watched a brand ad on Meta 29 days ago, really buy into it, I then watch a product video 15 days ago, and then I go on to click a DPA ad and buy, there's only currently one solution which can tie that together, which I think is quite interesting. But instead, I think I expect to see so much change in the measurement play, in the measurement space. And one thing what I love is how Dima have come to the market. So if I look at them specifically, I think they're another option where all of that piece I said at the start around how much more brands can be doing before relying on an attribution tool to tell you a ROAS, there's so much more data you can be building yourself. And Dima have basically just gone and enabled all of that out the box. So you would basically go in and it gives you, contribution margin down to a product level of like, here's how much you've spent on this product on Google Shopping, indexing the ad name from Meta. So if the creative name matches the product, it will pull in that ad spend. 30% of our agency spend on Meta is catalog ads, where it's basically the product feed. So it's a single product going through to PDP. 30% of our spend goes there. So all of that data is pushed into the product. And then it just gives you the sequential view of every bit of data after that. So, pull in the margin. So it'll tell you the actual profit that you drove from that purchase. It will tell you the returns. So it will tell you kind of like, gross profit minus returns. It will tell you the stock. So it'll tell you whether you actually want to be pushing that product. And then basically it'll just give you like a final number around how efficient it is. And it also gives you actually the new customers. So down to, imagine you've got a list of all of your products and it's talking you through 80% of customers were new who bought this item. Here's the ad spend you had assigned to it. Here's the contribution margin. Here's the amount of stock. And then I say, here's the CAC, as if that was your like final most important metric. And day one, that just gives so much opportunity to just re-optimize how you're spending budget. Like we're doing this manually currently for clients, and it's a great piece of work to do. And I think, we've got so many clients where they've got a lot of strong products where we're just not essentially spending enough behind it, where the CAC suggests that we've got capability to spend more. And actually back to the whole kind of like testing piece as well. What a way to prove incrementality if you just completely double investment on a certain group of products and you measure the uplift of those versus others. So we did this for one of our clients recently, actually, where we just completely doubled down on a specific suit over summer. And it was like everywhere, doubled the investment in content, probably quadrupled the ad spend. And what a way to measure the overall impact, where you just compare that suit specifically against the rest of the website and how it traded. So, website's grown 15% year on year. That suit's grown 70%. That 55% difference divided by your ad spend is essentially kind of like, your true ROI of that big push. But essentially what Dima does is it just gives you all of this data day one, and it's all out the box. It's the first tool to really be looking at this. Their narrative is they've built the tool for CFOs, and I can completely understand that. I think if you look back to what I was saying earlier in the talk around how I would want to, what data I'd want to give a CFO, it's not going to be a ROAS we've been given from a tool. It's going to be objective data, which really helps us make the next decision. So the other challenge I sometimes find with the measurement tools is it's all quite, and especially MMM, where, the MMM is looking back over 2 years. Most of our clients spend majority of their budget in 2 channels, and there's not too much you can learn if you're not going to be too far off of assuming quite accurately what the ROAS will be. Whereas something like Dima, just gives you kind of like 10 times more context around at a product level. Are you driving new customers profitably? Where's their scope to spend more? They've built in all of the Geo-Based capability themselves. So basically, out of the box, it will just give you recommended testing environments. So it might just say, here's 20 states in the US versus 10. And over the last 2 years, they've performed exactly in line. And we propose that you run your test in these 20 states. And the reporting will basically just be, the line graph of the predicted exposed group based on the control group and the actual revenue of the exposed group. So it'll tell you that kind of like uplift. So I think I just think it's a solution which, it definitely gives you, it's a bit easier to kind of like build a narrative and get backing for ad spend and make better decisions. And it definitely helps you drive more profits. I think I think it wouldn't surprise me if I saw the other tools starting to layer in some of this stuff. And I said Northbeam have just had a really, really decent update from their side. And then for Triple Whale and Foster's, to be honest, are probably more commonly used from our clients, definitely have a really strong place and definitely have a really good offering. My focus is making sure they're used to their capability, and just make sure that we're, every piece of data that we can pull out, we're using it properly, and we're not just like lazily relying on a third party tool to tell us the answer. We're really, really pulling out all of the additional data it does give us. And I would love to own a measurement tool. I think there's so much value in them. But I think you also need to be kind of like very, very focused on making sure the tool's used properly. Sometimes either I've seen, CFOs asking people how the tools got to the answer and no one really knows. I just think there's like a lot of upskilling to be done in terms of like, why are we using this tool? How do we get the best out of it? And the whole KPI alignment piece is massive at the moment in terms of having all teams fully agreed on the KPIs. That's a big trend we're seeing currently.
And where do you see this headed in terms of, do you think it's just going to become ubiquitous where every brand is using a third party tool like this to do the analysis just because the value add in targeting, or is it really dependent on the scale of the investment in terms of like volume of ad spend to get the marginal benefits out of it?
I mean, that's a very good question. I think realistically, anyone at a decent size will, if not use a third party solution, will be building the capability to pull this data out themselves. As I said, we're kind of like the LTV by first item ordered. We're doing that with clients currently. We're building CAC views at a product level and at category level. So day one, we can see where clients should be spending more or where we think there's potential to spend more. Third-party solutions do that out the box and provide, as I mentioned, the fingerprinting piece, the MMM piece. So I think there will be a massive shift towards measurement. And I think the bigger change will be realistically finance teams getting on board with what the KPIs are, how it's tracked, what tests we're introducing. And then I think there'll just be a decision made in the business, whether it's internal capability and time goes into that, or it's utilized via a third party.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. This is I guess the closer involvement of a finance team in the understanding of the value of this upfront, rather than trying to have to go cap in hand because you want more budget to do more paid media and having a cynical person who's not been brought on the journey and doesn't buy into the data.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and we've got most of our clients now will be, I think our average cost of sale is probably 15 to 18% across the agency. And like, we've got some clients that are growing rapidly where it's above 20. And it's now just such a commercial decision for the business around how performance marketing budget is spent where it's spent, how it's tracked. Is it incremental? I mean, I think we said on the last podcast we did, actually, it's almost like the return of brand spend incrementality. So, I've been in search, was my first role. So I've been in search for 14 years. And I feel like if I had a graph of brand incrementality tests, it would have been 14 years ago, very prominent, 8 years ago, very prominent. And then, the last 2-3 years, it's kind of come back again. And it's just because, so much spend is going into it. CFOs be searching, they'll be arguing, is this incremental? Do we need to spend 20p on a bid for our brand term? Or do we want to build the demand, put all of that into building demand and everything else? So yeah, I think just because it's such a big part of the equation, and we've got some brands who are just like fully reliant on performance marketing. Like they've grown the business via, I'd say organic as well, but organic and paid social, we've got a lot of clients that have grown businesses there. And as a result, you kind of need to make sure everyone's aligned around, how much we're spending, how much can we spend, what does additional spend mean for the business, and everything else.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. I'm going to draw a close to this here, because I could ask you loads and loads of rabbit hole questions now about measuring. But I think the important thing is for people listening is that the intelligence behind measuring the performance marketing and the removal of ambiguity is completely the direction of travel. And it definitely feels that for a long time, I've been in the industry for a long time, and continuously attribution models have come up, have been criticized. People have debated and said which ones should be used, and people look at 3 different numbers and don't know why. And removing the ambiguity that comes with that, you either fix on an attribution model and say we don't care, we're just looking at the trends and we believe in the model, even if it's not accurate, but at least or you, as you said, you switch to a different and smarter set of KPIs and measure it that way. So it feels like there's quite a clear direction of travel in the industry.
Yeah, certainly.
But look, Josh, I always learn loads talking to you and listening to you. For anyone listening who is interested by this or has got more questions and thinking, oh God, like how do we do this, or what should we be focused on? Why? Josh's contact details on the landing page. Reach out, connect with him on LinkedIn. As I say, he's got a lot of advice to share. And if you're needing any support with optimizing your performance marketing, you know who to speak to. Josh, thanks for joining us.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks for having me. And enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Yeah, take care. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Fun.
You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast, hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.